You'll see me showcase our next generation HMI web client in runtime. Then I will step through some of the very simple configuration steps in order to deploy a system. So the first thing we'll do here is I'll open up inside of a browser our client. So here you see our new client, which is HTML5 and is hosted inside of the HTML5 compliant browser, being Google Chrome in this case. The first thing you see is an interactive screen that allows users to not just see their process information, but also interact with it by entering set point values, acknowledging alarms, and so forth, as they normally would do in a SCADA environment. So at a first glance, what you see in this client is several different pieces of information being presented to the user. We call these cards inside of this system. So the main card, which you see in the top, represents a process graphic, and this is a traditional HMI display where users can interact with that display. Stacked along the bottom are the trend card, so people can see trends and have that ability inside of their screens. We also have an alarm card, which shows a summary of all alarms, which users can interact with by acknowledging alarms from within this environment. Also, they can filter this to get more specific, detailed information about their alarms. And then we have a roll-up card, which shows all alarms out of context for the entire system. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at each of these cards in a bit more detail. So we have the ability also inside of this client to display this information in different ways. So this is what we call a layout. So in this particular layout, we see the 4 cards. We also provide, when you install the product, different types of layouts, so you can see things in different ways. It still is relating to the location in the asset model that Matt described earlier, but the layouts just allow the users to have a different view of the data in context to that element of the asset model. In this case, we're still at the finished water pump station area of the model, and what we're doing is we're just showing data in a different layout, so more of a full screen view of that same display. And notice it may have been subtle, but one thing that we do very well is that we also scale. So we take advantage of a responsive design type environment that we've incorporated into this client so that we can scale proportionately to the resolution and aspect ratio that your clients are being viewed within. The next thing we'll do is we'll take a look at some of the other types of layouts that are related to HMI displays. And here we have another one where we have it stacked. So we have just the HMI card stacked on top of the alarm summary card. And this is a very traditional view where customers today in their systems have a lot of this style of graphics where they have navigation somewhere along the top or bottom, and then they have their process graphics screen somewhere as their main window or in the middle or top, and then they have an alarm summary type control or alarm management type control along the bottom. So inside of this new client that we're offering, we're showing that you can still have your traditional views that customers are very accustomed to today. And then we also have different styles of views for also the cards. So the cards don't all have to be displayed along with a process graphic. You can have a console that just is specific for looking at trends. You can have stations that are specific to looking at alarms, and so on and so forth. So it's quite flexible in that manner. And here you can see the alarm card. And inside the alarm card, you have the ability to not only see the alarms, in this case in context to the finished water pump station, but you also have the ability to acknowledge alarms. And that's done quite simply by just selecting the checkbox and selecting acknowledge or cancel depending on what you want to do. And if you were to choose acknowledge, you would just see a check mark applied next to the alarm, and the icon status would change, showing the appropriate state of that alarm, being still in alarm, yet having been acknowledged by the user. When it comes down to looking at other things like trends, we also can show that in full screen, and you have the ability to see our trend objects. And in the trend objects, you can host a variety of pens. There's not really an upper limit. You can put what you'd like in there. You can view both real-time and historical data. And some of the nice little features that we have built into this is the fact that you can hover over a particular item or pen itself and it will highlight. And you also have the ability to select the pen itself and hide it. So you can have a bit more specific view at certain types of data without necessarily having to configure a program, pens to load or unload, or groups, or different type of other configuration exercises that you may have had to do in the past. So it's quite a nice little feature to build in, whether it be a drag and drop or just a click to show or hide. It's a great little feature. It's a very configurable trend itself, so we can go ahead and select how the time span that we want to see data in, and there's a time picker, and you can see where data is coming in, where there's gaps, if any. And again, you have a lot of control over this type of trending capability. When we look forward in a few moments at how this gets configured, you'll see even a greater level of flexibility and capability within the trend based on how you specify what loads in context to your model when you're navigating. So the next thing that we're going to take a look at is navigating through our asset model that we configured. And the asset model itself provides context to the data that we're looking at. So all of the information that we're just looking at came in the context of that finished water pump station. As we drill down into a different area or level inside of our model, we'll have the ability to see different types of information. So here, for example, I don't have historical trends that have been configured for the displacement pump, but I have real-time trends which are coming in. I very simply could have added that to my historian and had it plotted both real-time and historical data, but in this case I just wanted to show you the difference that we can do both. And we can do both on the same trend chart as well, so we could have real-time overlaid with historical if we would like to do that as well. The next thing we'll do here is take a look at some of these different layouts again in regards to this area of the model. So again, we're showing things in context. And let me backtrack just a little bit and go back to this alarms screen. You can see that we have no alarms in regards or in relation to displacement pump 1A. Whereas when we looked at the finished water pump station, we had 5 or so alarms that were active there. So one thing that you can do here to see alarms that aren't specifically related to displacement pump is we give you the capability to switch the card itself out of context, and we have the ability to say, show me all alarms out of context. And here it will bring in alarms across all of your areas that have been configured in your model, as opposed to ones that are just in context to displacement pump 1A. Okay, that's what this allows you to do. And then furthermore, you can further analyze your alarms or manage your alarms by filtering to a different granularity as well. So in this case, we'll just say, show me all alarms that are critical alarms. And if we hit filter, you can then see that the card updates and shows us the appropriate level of information that we're asking for. It gives us quite nice control over alarms with the alarm card, whether it be in full screen, whether it be in any other type of layout that we've configured. So the next thing we'll look at here is we're going to take a look at the full screen for this displacement pump to see a different process graphic. So in this case, the process graphic is quite simple, but it's a level 2 type display, and it allows us to see this information, and when we want to interact with some of this information on this card from a set point perspective, we can go ahead and do one of a few things, one being just clicking on the control panel, and the control panel will slide out, and what this gives us the ability to do is see if there's values in here that can be, if we can perform a set point on any of these values. And the way that we would determine if that is available or not is by this little icon that looks like a gear. This gear represents the ability to do data entry along with any type of property of the asset model that's been configured. So you have the ability to type a value in freehand if you would like, or you have the ability to come into the dialog box itself and increment or decrement with the arrows up and down. And then if you hit confirm, it would actually send the value down to the process. If we have other grouped items inside of this control view that aren't writable, or the user doesn't have permissions to interact with that data, the gear icon would not be present, so it would be hidden, and they would not see it so that they could control that value. So we provide security through the set point values. We also provide data validation, so if they type something in out of range, they would get a warning message saying the value you are typing in is not within the operating limits. Please type in the appropriate value, so to speak. Also, if a user doesn't have credentials, they would also see messages as well that say you don't have credentials to interact with this style of information. And that all gets pushed into our audit trail, which is on the SCADA server as opposed to the client. And it's there for a full audit trail for after the fact analysis of your process. So lastly, what we'll do is we'll just take a look back at the initial layout that we started with. And in this layout, again, it shows our HMI card just with a different process screen related to displacement pump 1A. It shows us our trends, again, the real-time trends, because we configured historical trends for the finished water pump station, and we configured real-time trends just to show the differences for the displacement pump. And of course, there were no alarms in the displacement pump. However, there's still 5 total alarms in the entire system. So I just wanted to step you through all the different types of capability. So, at a glance, what you've seen again is you've seen our next generation HMI client that hosts a variety of different types of information that can be presented to users at the right time within the right type of layout so that they can make the appropriate business decisions to be more productive. And as we heard Matt talk about in his presentation, the high performance HMI is all about presenting information to the right people in the right way so that they can make decisions quickly, accurate decisions quickly. So with that, you've seen me step through a lot of the capability already, and now I'm just going to give you a very quick tour of how this gets configured. So the first thing that we do to configure this is there's several different elements. We have our graphics element where we configure our displays. And we'll just take a quick look at the finished water pump station display. So in this display, we have the screen that you saw presented in the web HMI client, but we have tools that we've offered to allow you to create that screen and that part of your process visually. And once you've created your screen and you have that screen looking the way that you'd like to show operators, you would then go through to another tool which allows you to export that screen to the format in which our web client can render that display. So it's just a very simple process by selecting the file or many files at one time and hitting export. What it does is it takes the file from our native format for thick clients and it translates it into a JSON format which can be rendered inside of our HTML5 client. So the screens don't have to be open. You don't have to know anything about the screens other than that they were created with this type of capability in them. And also the location where you put these files is important so that you can go select them to be rendered inside of the web client, which I'll show you in just a moment. One last thing inside of here, what we've added to our systems is not just the toolbox in order to create these very nice displays and the ability to export them out to the client, but also we have templates that align very closely with what efficient HMI systems ask for. So different types of renderings, we call them dynamos in our system, and we have high performance here, different types of objects that we release with the products as well to help you accelerate how you create these screens. So just one example would be maybe gauges. If I were to open up the gauges, you can see the relevant feature sets that are complementary to the ISA 101 standards. So we have gauges with the operating limits. We have the appropriate color schemes that are can be rendered inside that comply as well or align well with efficient HMI standards. And it gives more of a full story just for that particular object. Okay, and I believe Matt spoke about that in his presentation. So we have that as additional components in our system to help users design screens that comply with efficient HMI very quickly. So once these screens are created, what you would do is go next into our client, our HTML5 client. Of course, given that you have permissions to do so and go to the administrator section, you would have the ability to go to a couple of the administrative tasks, which are bringing in or importing your graphics. So quite simply, as we've exported them from our designer, we now have the ability to bring them in and be rendered and associated with our asset model that has been configured, and so that they can be run in runtime when I select, for example, finished water pump station or displacement pump 1A. So you would bring in your export screens to whatever location you copied them to or exported them to. In this case, we exported them, and I'll just select import. It successfully imports the file, and then as you step through, you can see an instance of those graphics along with all the configuration elements that we natively bind for you in the system that bridges between the data source and our model. So the next step you would do is you would go into the model itself, and you would look to see where in the model you want screens to be displayed. As you step through your model, for example, I select a finished water pump station from my model. I want to show a display when I select the finished water pump station, and this is the display, or mimic as we call it, that would show up. And once we have that show up, you would have all the ability of parameters that are contained within that display, such as things like the ability to show trends. So we had a bunch of pens on that trend card initially, if you can recall. And here I'll just say, well, this time I only want to show, say, three properties. Okay, maybe we don't want to show the level, but we'll show the actual tank level. Yeah, we'll show the tank level, the suction pressure, and the suction level. And then we'll go ahead and save it. What we'll do is, at this point, that says when this display comes up, not only do you show that screen, but when you go to the trend component, you also see these items initially load into the trending capability. So now when I go into runtime, what I've done is I've brought in my HMI card to show up at the finished water pump station, being that finished water pump station overview screen. And that is all we had to do, is we just bind it, as opposed to have to script it or put a high level of customization for navigation. And then furthermore, I once had about 6 pens being displayed on that screen. Now I only have 3 for the trend card. So if I were to go to the trend full screen card, I would see that instead of the 6 pens I had, now I have 3. And this shows how you can configure all of the appropriate relevant information that shows up in context to that location in the model. So it's a very simple process to configure your screens, to export them out into this new HTML5 environment. And then once you bring them into this environment after they've been exported, it's a very, very simple checkbox configuration or binding configuration to associate information with each other that our model keeps track of for you. So again, as we step through the model, we see all of the relevant information that is associated with that model show up in context. And that really is a lot of what we're driving here, is showing information in context to users, again, so that they have all the necessary pieces of information to make the accurate decisions quickly. So thank you for taking this short time just to review our new capabilities through this demonstration.